Hello everyone and welcome to Christian Emotional Recovery, the YouTube channel. I'm your host, Rachel Leroy. I am also the creator and manager of Christian Emotional Recovery, the whole platform. Remember that we have a YouTube channel, we have a Facebook group of the same name, and we have a podcast of the same name. So check those out in the show notes if you would like to contribute to the podcast in any way and help me. There are expenses that go into it. I greatly appreciate it. You can help me to do God's work and help me to help other survivors like yourself. Just click on Patreon, that link, and it'll give you different options where you can commit. You can cancel at any time, anywhere from $5 to $100 a month and anything in between. And there is no obligation to contribute, but I greatly appreciate it. And I really do kind of need it right now, so it would be greatly appreciated. But honestly, there's no obligation. I just like to be honest about where I'm at too. But also, you can contribute one time at ko-fi.com. That's ko-fi.com, also in the show notes. Now, if you haven't, please click the subscribe bell so you can get notifications for every new YouTube and podcast that comes out. Keep in mind, the podcast is also on the YouTube channel, and you can get it in traditional podcast locations. Check out the website, Christian Emotional Recovery, which is where the podcast itself is housed and all the episodes. There's other good stuff there. Go to rachelleroy.com. You can see what I do with writing. If you're a writer, I can help you with that. If you are a non-English speaker and you would like to learn better English conversation, I can help you with that. And also check out, there are freebies there, and you can also join the email list, and I've made that more active in the last few months. So you can also subscribe and get freebies on christianemotionalrecovery.com and rachelleroy.com. They're in the show notes, so check that out. Okay, let's go ahead and jump right into the episode. This one is 21 ways to protect yourself as an HSP. 21 ways to protect yourself as an HSP. So when I have done my podcasts, the ones that people tend to respond to the most is the process of God healing you, the process of what an HSP is, which is a highly sensitive person, and childhood emotional neglect. Those by far have been the ones that people have viewed the most and asked for more resources on. So I'm going to try to create more resources and talks on those in particular. So I've got 5 sources that I'll be using in this talk. And there's, like I said, 21 ways to protect yourself as an HSP. And I listed this because there were several articles that had them listed. And so this is what I added up when I counted them. I'm not going to go into like hardcore detail because this talk would go on forever about each one. But I did want to go over several ways that you can protect yourself in different categories of how you can protect yourself in terms of actions and your emotions and boundaries and all of those things. So first, I wanted to talk about what an HSP is. Then I'll give context and insights on HSPs, highly sensitive people, how they operate, the science behind that, and what their gifts are and what makes them vulnerable. And I will list some ways then that you can protect yourself as an HSP. How to set boundaries, know your types of boundaries, practices to protect your emotions as an HSP, and ways to protect yourself as a Christian HSP. Because I think Christianity, for people that are empaths, that are more empathetic, that are more introverted, that are more sensitive, that can make us even more vulnerable because people can exploit that, or we can have this strong sense of moral obligation or moral just wanting to do the right thing and wanting to help people and feeling for people in a way that can actually put us in danger if we don't protect ourselves. You can help people and still protect yourself, right? So let's look a little bit at an HSP. There are several articles here. I'm going to look at one that's from Very Well Mind, so bear with me. I do read off a lot because my computer's here and I have my articles and my notes here to help me to give you this information today. So an HSP, first, like I said, we need to know a little bit about what an HSP is, the science behind it, how they operate and what their gifts are, right? So I'm in the Very Well Mind article. Bear with me, you may hear some clicking as well. One other place you can go, though, to get information about what an HSP is, I've got a podcast episode. I forgot the exact title, but it's something like, What is an HSP? And I will put that in the show notes. And if you want to know more about HSPs and highly sensitive people, and about your experience with this, click on that podcast episode and listen to it, and that will give you a foundation as well. So there's a part of the Very Well Mind article where it says what causes high sensitivity. And it talks about what an HSP is and what causes high sensitivity. And it says a highly sensitive person, this is Very Well Mind, this is by, let's see the article, Elizabeth Scott, PhD, and it's reviewed by Stephen Gans, MD. So a highly sensitive person, an HSP, is a neurodivergent individual who is thought to have an increased or deeper central nervous system sensitivity to physical, emotional, and social stimuli. So it's an actual scientific definition. Now, it says that they're neurodivergent. That's a very controversial assumption, and I'm not going to say whether they are or they aren't. And there are people who are neurodivergent, but what I'm seeing a pattern in our culture happening is that there are people who are genuinely in certain groups, and other people want to join that group and put themselves in that category. And sometimes I wonder if it might be overused a little bit, not to invalidate anybody's experience. So I don't know if that's neurodivergent or not, but it is a different way that people operate. And there's a small percentage of people that are highly sensitive, and your central nervous system is more sensitive to physical, emotional, and social stimuli. So you have to protect yourself more, right? You have to protect yourself more. And it says, some refer to this as having sensory processing sensitivity, or SPS for short. I've never heard that. I am a highly sensitive person. And one book that I would highly recommend is a book by Elaine Aron, A-R-O-N. And I can't remember what it is, but something about high sensitivity in a very noisy world. I can't remember the name of the book, but it's by Elaine Aron, and she's one of the authorities on high sensitivity, and she's one of the ones that brought out this term and made it respected in the science world. But I will put a link to her book in the show notes so you can refer to it if you want to have a place to start in more detail on your own. So we're all sensitive to certain things. It says that's human nature, but an HSP is understood to be different in terms of their level of sensitivity. While highly sensitive people are sometimes negatively described as being too sensitive, ever heard that? Sound familiar? It is a personality trait that brings both strengths and challenges. The term highly sensitive person was first coined by psychologist Elaine Aron and Arthur Aron, and that's A-R-O-N, in the mid-90s. Elaine Aron published her book, The Highly Sensitive Person, in 1996, and interest in the concept has continued to grow since. So I think that's the same book, The Highly Sensitive Person. So how do you know if you're an HSP? How do you know if you're an HSP? Have you ever been told you're too sensitive? Shouldn't think so much, particularly people who strike you as too insensitive or who believe you should think a little more. You may be a highly sensitive person. I think some people process things on the opposite end. They need stimulation, they need loudness, they need bright colors, they need lots of light, they need social engagement. And if you have like neighbors and they play loud music and they've got large groups of people in their yard and you're highly sensitive and you like dark clouds and quiet and solitude, that can drive you nuts. So I think people need to be considerate of each other. I think we need, as highly sensitive people, to tolerate that not everybody's like us and that they need some of that. But people who are like that are the ones that tend to have more advantage in our society. Like, people are loud and obnoxious, and that seems to be the glorified quality where people will try to steamroll over somebody if they ask them to be quiet, and they'll call them Karen. And I think that people can take that to an extreme. You don't need to nitpick at every little thing. There are certain things you need to tolerate, but at the same time, speaking up for yourself does not make you a Karen. So don't let somebody gaslight you into thinking that, okay? So empathy is a spectrum like many qualities and can cause difficulty if too high or too low. While neither is automatically bad, high empathy can be exhausting. But with appropriate support and coping, it says, you can manage your empathy levels and care for yourself appropriately. So how do you know if you're an HSP? It talks about that. It goes into more stuff. Avoid violent movies or TV shows. Some people with high sensitivity may have different sensitivities. Like, one HSP can tolerate loud noise, but they can't stand bright lights. Another person, it might be the other way around. Or some people, it might be both. Being deeply moved by beauty. that's an advantage. A lot of times HSPs are great artists and musicians, the human spirit, great writers, because they have that, they're attuned to those parts of human existence, right? Being overwhelmed by sensory stimuli like noisy crowds, bright lights, or uncomfortable clothing. I hate going to things where there are large crowds, generally. I hate them. I hate theme parks. I used to love them, but I hate them now. There's just noise, it's loud, it's hot, it's crowded, and those are all the things that I hate. I like quiet, solitude, and just a few people are just me, right? So feeling a need for downtime, not just a preference, especially when you have hectic days, needing a retreat to a dark, quiet room. Me, get it, I get it. Having a rich and complex inner life, that's another advantage, complete with deep thoughts and strong feelings that go with them. Most HSP Christians have a very active spiritual life and do a lot of spiritual practice. But the Aarons also develop highly sensitive personality test or personality questionnaire to help you identify yourself if you're an HSP. So that is linked in the Very Well Mind article in the section on how do you know if you're an HSP. So if you want to take that test, you can also Google it and you can probably find tests there. How common are HSPs? They're about 20% of the population, according to this article, and it's less common to be highly sensitive, and society tends to be built around those who notice a little less and are affected a little less deeply. That's what I was talking about with, like, people will take the side of the person, like if there's a conflict because of that in an environment, they'll take the side of the person that's less sensitive. And I don't get that, because that person can adapt a lot easier. All they have to do is turn their music down a little bit. They can put on headphones. They can play their music loud inside their house. You know, there are ways they can adapt that are a minor inconvenience for them, and it might completely destroy that other person to have to deal with that, because it might trigger PTSD symptoms. You get what I'm saying? So culture tends to cater to less sensitive people, unfortunately, and extroverts. There's nothing wrong with being less sensitive. There's nothing wrong with being an extrovert, but I'm glad that culture is starting to understand some of these other types more. What causes high sensitivity? Well, it depends on factors such as evolution, environment, genetics, and early childhood experiences. High sensitivity, it says, exists in at least 100 other species aside from humans, and that's that we know of. Research suggests that high sensitivity is an evolutionary trait that increases the likelihood of survival because HSPs are on the lookout for potential predators and dangerous situations. So that is a trait that has been created in a small version of the population so that we can protect ourselves from, back in the day, saber-toothed tiger. We would be the first one to hear it. We would be the first one to see something lurking in the dark. And so that is actually something that can keep a whole tribe alive, or a whole group or pack of animals alive, when the one that's sensitive detects it and alerts the other to the danger or whatever. So if you experience trauma as a child, you may be more likely to become an HSP as an adult as well. So that's another thing. Because you're in fight or flight, you're more aware of things, you're hypervigilant. If you're hypervigilant, and then if you have a natural sensitivity like I do, then that just kind of doubles it, and you can have issues with adrenals and high cortisol and overstimulation. And that's why we talk about the vagus nerve and vagal nerve stimulation to kind of regulate and be in that core place of being a healthy introvert and empath, where you're not overstimulated. So there's a lot of factors, but it is something that is respected in science because there's a lot of scientific research that proves it. Similar conditions and traits: introversion, sensory processing disorder, autism, and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So those are some things that can overlap and or be mixed up with it. That doesn't mean you have any of those or that you are any of those. It doesn't mean you're not. So every situation is different, and it's not good or bad. It's just, it is what it is. And every condition or tendency comes with its own sets of strengths and challenges. And so it's not about, well, I'm autistic, so I'm not as good as you. No, you have unique gifts, but unique challenges that you need to integrate and deal with. And that's okay. If you're an introvert, we live in a society where extroverts are glorified and introverts are only, I don't want to say they're considered inferior, but we cater to extroverts. And I think that's wrong. I mean, I think introverts are just as good as extroverts, and they have gifts that extroverts don't have. God made us all different for a reason. There's a wide variety of people because God wanted us to have unique gifts so we could help each other. We're like pieces of a puzzle, and when we work together, we are a whole, right? That's why the sensitive people and animals alerting people to danger is a good thing. That's why our sensitive souls that create the art and the music and the books that we love, the people that have insights into human nature, the healers, the lovers, the activists, those people, we need them. And those are the highly sensitive people that have special gifts. So it can be confused with other things, and it does overlap with other things too. Impact of being an HSP, advantages and challenges. You might avoid situations that that leave you feeling overwhelmed. That's a disadvantage. You might be highly touched by beauty or emotionality. That can be a good thing if you don't let it, you just want to keep that balanced, of course. You may be particularly close in terms of your relationships. HSPs feel deeply, so they get very close to people that are safe. So that's why you have to protect your energy from people that are toxic and unhealthy, because you're more vulnerable. But when you have those deep, trusting relationships, those bonds are so powerful and so healing. So you may also be grateful for the life you have. Highly sensitive people appreciate things like fine wine, a good meal, a beautiful song, or a level that most people can't access. So just daily life. I mean, when I'm healthy, because I have so many health problems, I just go around so thankful for even though I don't like bright lights in the sky, there's also something about it I'm grateful for, and rain and food and grass and trees and birds and air and just everything, And so if you're an HSP, you probably understand that. HSPs do not thrive well with hectic schedules, high expectations that are constantly coming from others, conflicts, or social comparison. I don't like any of those things. Those things in of themselves are not bad, but HSPs tend to not like those things. They tend to not like those things. So I could keep going on, but I want to talk about ways to integrate being an HSP and ways to protect yourself as an HSP. So a little bit about that. Like I said, bear with me. I'm looking at my notes here. I've got a lot of notes for this one. So how do you protect yourself in terms of being an HSP? First, I want to talk a little bit more about how HSPs operate, and then we'll talk about ways you can protect yourself. So there's an article called 12 Self-Care Coping Skills. 12 self-care coping skills for empaths or highly sensitive people to prevent burnout. That's a long title, so I won't repeat it. And it's from a website called Courageous and Mindful. Courageous and Mindful. I was trying to find an author. By Heather Timm, M-A-L-P-C. Heather Timm, T-I-M-M, is the writer. And this is on Courageous and Mindful. And so HSPs and empaths are not exactly the same thing, but I think they're closely related enough that the insights that you get, and there's so much overlap, they are almost the same thing. But it says if you're an empath or highly sensitive person, it can seem like a world around you is constantly invading your personal bubble. And without proper care, the world can wear you down and burn you out. And this person has some strategies to help you protect yourself. I'm not going to go over those right now. But what is an empath? So empaths, I think this is a word that gets thrown around and used a lot. And I've actually heard people call themselves one that very clearly were not. I've heard narcissists call themselves an empath. And I'm like, but I didn't say anything. I kept my mouth shut. I bit my tongue. But empaths can be described as an emotional sponge. They're very sensitive, intuitive people who can feel another person's emotions or the emotions in a room, and are the opposite of narcissists. Specifically, these are folks that can put themselves in another person's shoes to understand their feelings and experiences better. So it's a special gift that God gave some of us, because even the Bible says when your friend or your neighbor is joyful, celebrate with them. When they're sad, mourn with them. And that's something that empaths do very well naturally. But they feel empathy, the ability to imagine what someone else might be thinking or feeling more than the average person, meaning that an empath takes this to the next level from what the average person feels. Not that regular people can't feel empathy. Of course they can. And we know that full-blown narcissists have no empathy. And then empaths can have very high levels of empathy. And I used to think I used to think that there was no way you could have too much empathy, and I do think that you can now. I think that you can have so much empathy that it can actually cripple you, and it can cause you to enmesh with other people, meaning there's no boundaries. It's not healthy. And that's where you burn yourself out, and you let people run over you, and you let people abuse you. And you can have so much feeling for somebody that you drown in that. If you look at the news, there's always somebody who's dying. There's always somebody who's suffering. There's always somebody who's going through something. And if you were to just dwell on that and try to help every single person in existence, which you can't do, you would just completely collapse in exhaustion and overwhelm. And so there is a certain level of callousness that you have to have. That's not the right word, but you have to set a boundary. You can't feel everything all the time. You can't help everybody. The best place to start is right where you're at and help the people in your own community. Help the people that are right here around you, or help people in an issue where you feel a really strong conviction. Or that's why I do this work, because I want to help people like you and like me who have been mistreated and run over and abused and neglected. And I want to help you to get the life that you deserve. I want you to be able to not suffer. And that's why I focus on this. It doesn't mean that if there's a need, you don't help somebody in some other area, but focusing on one area is one way that you can protect yourself but still help people. Focus on the people in your own community and the people that are around you here and now. So empathy is on a spectrum. It's where you can relate to others' emotions without taking on their emotions. So that's the balance. That's why I said you want to feel for them, but you don't want to take it on. It's kind of like when I talk about processing your emotions in the acorn meditations. You feel the emotion, but you don't enmesh with it. You don't drown in it. You don't let it possess you or control you. Does that make sense? So empathy is the same way with somebody. You can feel with them and feel for them without drowning in that or just letting it take you over. And so you have to have filters. You have to have filters. So basically, the science behind an empath, there is science here too. It's not just made up. So what are mirror neurons? They've done research where empaths or HSPs have people with high empathy traits on tests. They have what are called more mirror neurons. And mirror neurons create mimicry, where you mimic. And it says if you ever held an infant and smiled at them, you may have noticed that they smile back in return. The same is true if you stuck your tongue out at them and they in turn stuck out their tongue at you. And of course, the classic yawn, you get the idea. Unless you're a sociopath, it says. Mirror neurons can be activated and create mimicry. For example, an empath has mirror neurons that are more easily activated and cue areas of the empath's brain to light up with a stronger response. And I would add here in brackets, than the average person, meaning the same motor and sensory areas of the empath's brain light up as the person's brain that they are observing. Very interesting, right? However, this is done on a spectrum. The average non-narcissist, not psychopath, not sociopath person feels empathy and is a form of attenuation, meaning they feel it to a degree. But for an empath, these areas may light up more intensely, which takes the empath to the next level. So you can do brain scans and see the proof that some people have this attunement more than others in their actual brain. Then it just gives examples of how somebody might feel empathy. If somebody stubs their toe and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. You're like, that's so sorry. I know what it feels like to stub my toe and to say all kinds of things I shouldn't. And then you feel the other person's pain, you know. Sometimes it can be kind of funny, but then there are sad, horrible situations too, right? But attenuation makes it possible to empathize with another person's distress, but not become overwhelmed by it and render you just as helpless. Unless, of course, you're an empath, at which point you feel the other person's distress to a much higher degree and may, in fact, feel a sense of helplessness. But there are ways that you can sort of protect yourself and pull back from that and still feel the sense of empathy. And so it just keeps going with different examples of this empathy and how it lights up the brain and how empaths have more of it than others. And even cognitive empathy is the ability to understand how a person feels emotionally and what they might be thinking. For an empath, this ability comes easier, and as a result, it makes them better communicators because they can use this information to reach the other person. So empaths, when they find the right people, when you find the right safe people, you can actually have better relationships and more deep relationships than an average person. Emotional empathy, or affective, that's AFFECTIVE, empathy, is the ability to pick on affective states of others. I feel your pain is used to build emotional connection with other people. So if you're next to somebody and it says they start to cry, when you're experiencing will most likely impact you and may elicit an emotional response from you. So you will start to feel what that other person feels in a lot of ways. Compassionate empathy, understanding others and their feelings. The empath's kryptonite is, so this is where the kicker comes in. No surprise here, but the empath's kryptonite are those that struggle with personality disorders, more specifically narcissistic personality disorder, at the very least, those with high narcissistic traits. Narcissism exists on a spectrum, but the hallmark criteria of the narcissist are a lack of empathy, an inflated sense of self-importance, and a sense of entitlement, and the key need for admiration. You would think that these hallmark criteria would repel most people, but narcissists can also be very charismatic and charming. You get the idea. Here is where the hook comes in. So narcissists don't have healthy self-worth and self-esteem. So they're constantly seeking praise. And instead they project their sense of worthlessness and shame onto others. And because the empath is driven by the need to help others, because they attune to other people, because they have those mirror neurons that reflect back whatever that person is showing them, they try to heal the wounded narcissist with love and compassion, but they end up taking on those characteristics and they end up absorbing all that toxic energy. So what ends up happening is the empath has a good, unless they have good boundaries, they will absorb the narcissist's feelings of worthlessness and shame. And the narcissist will project them onto them, so it's a double whammy, and treat them like they're worthless and give them shame. So they know how to manipulate and gain an empath's love by providing what feels like love and connection. And then it's like they do this bait and switch where it's just this constantly feast and famine, love bombing, hoovering. Love bombing is where they're just like so wonderful and there's such a connection, but it's just like this care. It's like if you meet somebody and in 2 weeks you're like, we're getting married. You're like, what? That's probably a narcissist and an empath. And because they love bomb you, they pull you in so quick that by the time you realize how they are, you're already invested, and it's dangerous. So what has just occurred is an empath's sense of self-worth has now become contingent on healing the wounded narcissist. If they can overcome the challenge of making a person who is not capable of love them, the empath is truly worthy of love. And it doesn't work, folks. Ever. With a narcissist, it never, ever works. The only thing you can do is set boundaries and or get the hell away from them. Pardon my language, but that's what you have to do. And that is where protecting yourself comes in. And everything is not narcissism. The world is chaotic. The world is unpredictable. And so just your environment, there are specific ways as an empath and as an HSP, a highly sensitive person, that you can protect yourself. And so I just wanted to give you some context on how HSPs operate, the science behind it, what the gifts are, and what makes them vulnerable. So how do you set boundaries? I'm going to go through these kind of fast. There's an article here about setting boundaries as an HSP. Pardon the clicking. Like I said, I'm looking at 4 or 5 articles here. This one is called The Art of Boundary Setting for a Highly Sensitive Person, and it's by Joseph Haunuvi. And it's in an article, it's in a website called Highly Sensitive Refuge. I've been to this website. It's a really good website. There's a lot of good resources there. If you're an HSP, check it out, okay? Check it out. So it's highlysensitiverefuge.com. I'll put it in the show notes. And this one is The Art of Boundary Setting for the Highly Sensitive Person. And this is where the 21 ways to protect yourself come in. And some of those are about boundary setting. So in this article, I'm going to read a section called What Are Boundaries and Why Are Boundaries Important in the article, and 4 tips for setting boundaries. So what are boundaries? You probably know a little bit about that. I have some resources on that. I will put those in the show notes as well. I may have a YouTube video of it. I'm not sure, but I think I have a podcast on it. So what are boundaries? Boundaries are the limits we set for ourselves in order to protect our physical, emotional, and mental well-being, says this article. They are behaviors that are and are not acceptable to us. It helps to think of them as invisible lines that separate us from others and help us feel safe, respected, and in control. As for types of boundaries, they can be physical, such as personal space, emotional, such as not allowing others to make us feel guilty or responsible for their emotions, or mental, such as not allowing others to manipulate or control us. So why are boundaries especially important for highly sensitive people? They're important for everybody. But for highly sensitive people, it says they're so empathetic and caring, this can make it challenging for you to set boundaries. You may be a people pleaser and feel guilty to say no to people. I get people contacting me all the time talking about that and saying, what do I do? And I'll give them resources on boundary setting. You can set boundaries and still love people and still be kind to people and still help people. We're called by God to do that. And so as HSPs, we probably have even a stronger sense of obligation where we can feel guilty. And that is, no. Don't let anybody manipulate you with fear, obligation, and guilt. Again, I have a podcast coming out on that called Coming Out of the Fog. Fear, obligation, and guilt is coming out of the fog. And narcissists will take that quality in you that is a gift, that is about loving other people, and they will exploit it. Don't let them do it. Don't let them do it. It says, or you may feel responsible for others' feelings. You are not responsible for anybody else's feelings. Now, if you do something that hurts somebody, you should apologize, but you are not responsible for somebody else's feelings automatically. And then, however, it is important to remember that setting boundaries is not selfish. It is a necessary part of self-care. Without having any in place, you may find yourself feeling overwhelmed, drained, and taken advantage of. Then you can't do God's work because you're not functional. So you have to set boundaries in order to be able to be your best and to help and to serve. That's the irony. By setting boundaries, you are able to protect your energy and maintain a healthy relationship. So 4 tips for setting boundaries for the highly sensitive person. These are some of the ways that I was talking about to protect yourself. Know your limits and like what makes you feel overwhelmed. Start to study when you start to get overwhelmed and ask yourself, have I had enough? Can I do this anymore? And so the first step is setting boundaries is knowing your limits. Understanding what drains your energy, what makes you feel overwhelmed, and what is or is not acceptable to you. Take some time, maybe in a journal, to reflect on what you need in order to feel safe, respected, and in control. Writing them down in journaling helps too. There's a link here, so there may be some techniques in this Highly Sensitive Refuge boundary setting article in number 1 of tips to set boundaries that might help you. Communicate your boundaries to others. Practice does make perfect. So when you first do this, you will be terrified, especially if it's somebody that's bullied you or pushed you around. And keep in mind, not everybody who you feel pushed around by is necessarily bad or a narcissist. They might not know that you are overwhelmed or that you need space. They might be a good person, so keep that in mind. Just because you're overwhelmed by somebody doesn't mean they're bad. Or maybe it's a child or somebody with special needs, and you need help and you need space. And with people that can do this, you may need to say, no, I can't do that for you right now. I'm sorry. So practice is scary, but you get better at it and it starts to feel more natural. It really does. I've struggled with this myself, and I've gotten better about speaking up about my needs. I still struggle with it, especially with people who can be more difficult, but I have learned to get a lot better at this. So once you know your limits, it's important to communicate your boundaries to others, it says. This can be intimidating, especially if you're not used to setting boundaries. However, it is important to be clear and direct in your communication. You can do it in a loving way. Use I statements such as, I feel overwhelmed when I have too many commitments. This way you are genuinely expressing how you feel, what you need, and with more practice, it does get easier. So you're not saying you're doing this and you're doing that. That's how you're going to get a reaction. But if you say, I feel, I am this way, then that is a better way to communicate your boundaries in a way that's kind and in a way where somebody is more likely to understand. Keep in mind, a narcissist, sometimes they'll understand, but more times they're not going to understand, but you have to set your boundary anyway. And with people that are good and maybe they just don't realize it, a lot of times they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And you're like, no. But you just need to tell them, Stand up for yourself and practice being assertive. Assertiveness is the ability to express your thoughts, feelings, and needs in a direct and respectful way. It's a form of standing up for yourself. Did Jesus sit back and just, I don't want to hurt their feelings. Or did he speak out and say what he needed to say? He didn't say any more or any less than that. He was loving and kind about it, but he was direct. And with the Pharisees, buddy, he was not nice. He would just tell them straight up, how dare you, And I'm not saying we should do that, but I'm just saying that Jesus, there's nothing wrong with being assertive. If Jesus was without sin, then that proves that being assertive and setting boundaries and being straightforward is not a sin. So it's important to practice assertiveness when setting boundaries because it allows you to be clear and direct without being aggressive or passive. So if you don't want to go to the movie Friday night, you need to say so, Respect others' boundaries too, when they're physical, emotional, or mental. So this goes both ways. It's about respecting other people's boundaries, recognizing them. If you start to see somebody that seems like they're overwhelmed as an empath, you tune into that. Ask them, are you okay? Do you need us to maybe table this and do this later? Be considerate of other people, even if they're not speaking up, and maybe just check in with them. Because that can be very helpful. And it's good in relationships where you care about people because people may not always be consciously aware of it, or maybe they're scared to say something too. And so it might not be you. It could just be they have that struggle with that same thing. So, if somebody seems to be struggling, just pull them aside privately and ask them, are you okay? Are we okay? Is everything cool? Do you need anything? Because that's about other people's boundaries too. It's important to respect the boundaries of others. This includes not crossing their physical, emotional, or mental boundaries. It also means being understanding if they need to set boundaries with you. So don't take it too personally. It stings. I've had it sting when somebody set boundaries with me, but if I know they love me, I know that that's them and not me, and I don't have to take that personally. And then I got over it very quickly. It gets better with time as you learn to work with this, when you realize people's intentions are not bad, when you know that person. Just think about how much you appreciate it when others respect and honor your boundaries, it says, and do the same here. So different types of boundaries. These are other ways you can protect yourself. Physical boundaries is one of the ones I mentioned earlier. Setting physical boundaries is highly important for highly sensitive people. It involves creating limits on how much time you spend with others, setting physical limits on personal space and touch. For example, if you don't feel comfortable with someone wanting to shake your hand or hug you, you might say, I don't feel comfortable with physical touch. Please don't hug me. You can smile at them or, be kind, but you can be honest about it. It sets a clear boundary. Maybe somebody is standing too close to you. You may move back a bit or something like that. Setting limits with how much time you spend with others, like I can only meet for an hour. It's also important to have a physical space you can retreat to when you need time alone or time to recharge, like your sanctuary, a calm, soothing place with your favorite pillows, blankets, soft lighting, and so on, and to communicate your boundaries clearly and respectfully. So that's physical boundaries. Emotional boundaries. These are the ones we have to set with narcissists, especially. And that is, setting emotional boundaries might involve not allowing others to make you feel responsible for their emotions, or not allowing yourself to feel overwhelmed by the emotions of others. That's where you have to pull back. You don't enmesh. That's not selfish. That's actually healthy. And enmeshment can actually be debilitating and toxic. So that is not the kind of Christian love that we're called to have. The kind we're called to have is to feel for other people, but still set that boundary where we don't get into it so much that we get lost, okay? So if you say, for example, I understand that you're upset, but it is not my responsibility to fix your problems, or I'm here to support you, but it's ultimately your responsibility to manage your emotions. Of course, we're talking about adults, not children. With children, we have to teach them these things, and we have to empathize and mirror. We can still not get enmeshed. Like if they're throwing a tantrum, you can just be calm and set a boundary and empathize, reflect what they're going through without giving in to their tantrum. That's hard, right? And some adults do that. Narcissists are still like 2-year-olds when they throw a tantrum. And you might have to deal with them differently because they're an adult. And that's when you would say, your feelings are not my responsibility. Whereas with a child, you might have to guide them more, right? So if you've got a friend who's emotionally immature and they're trying to grow, yeah, you can help them, but only if they're showing signs and actions that they're actually trying to do that, not trying to use you, right? And make you responsible for how they feel. So mental boundaries is another one. Mental boundaries are another important aspect of self-care for highly sensitive people. Setting mental boundaries involves being aware of, protecting your thoughts and beliefs. It is about being in control of your thoughts, emotions, and beliefs and not letting others dictate how you should think or feel. One way to set mental boundaries is by being assertive and having direct communication. For example, when you say something like, I appreciate your opinion, but I continue to hold my own beliefs about this and will not be coerced into thinking otherwise. It's one thing to respect somebody's opinion, but if they're trying to shove their opinion down your throat, yeah, you can set a boundary, right? It could be saying something like, I'm going to take a break from this conversation and process my thoughts before responding. What a narcissist or just somebody who's overbearing will often do is they'll try to just ram through your boundary. They'll try to just push through, and you have to set that boundary and be firm with it and stick with it, and you will feel so vulnerable. But do not give in. Do not let them cross your boundary. Hold the line with those kind of people. Always hold the line with those kind of people. And they will try to get an answer out of you if they're trying to obligate you to something and get you to commit to something you don't want to do. A phrase I've learned, even when I'm flustered, is I'll get back to you. Let me get back to you on that, okay? I'll get back to you. Let me get back to you with that, okay? And that tends to neutralize the conversation, and it gives you time to think about it where you can process it when they're not in your face, when you're calm, and that's a way you can set a boundary. Time boundaries is the fourth and last one. So we have physical, emotional, mental, and time boundaries. Time boundaries involve creating boundaries around the amount of time you spend with others as well as the amount of time you have for yourself. It's necessary for HSPs to help them rejuvenate because they can get overwhelmed by social interactions, work, and activities. For example, you might tell someone, I need time for myself and will not be available for social activities every night of the week or on certain nights or days of the week. That allows you to create a balance between your social life for self-care and self-reflection. Or maybe you've already done 3 social engagements that week and somebody is like, hey, you've got to go to this thing. And you say no. It's okay. You can say no. It's like Sunday night, you're burnt out, you need to relax, and maybe you need to just veg in front of the TV and binge Netflix. So you do that. Or you need to spend the day and you spend your time with God in worship on Sunday morning, whatever that is for you, in church or online church or your quiet time. And then you take a nap and eat a good meal. And then you clean up and you watch TV and take a nap. Everybody needs that. And HSPs need it especially, but everybody needs it, right? So that was some of the things about boundary setting in relationships and how to protect yourself as an HSP, especially in setting boundaries. So those were some of the 21 ways to protect yourself as an HSP. I'm going to go through a list here that covers some other ones, and there are a bunch here. Follow me, but I'm just going to go straight on through these to help you to understand a little bit more about protecting yourself. The last one is ways to protect yourself as a Christian HSP, and we'll get there in just a little bit. So bear with me. I know this one's kind of long. So what are some ways to protect yourself emotionally? 5 ways to protect your emotions. I'm just going to go over these very quickly. First, 5 ways to protect yourself as your emotions, and then ways to protect yourself as a Christian HSP. Okay? So there's an article here in Highly Sensitive Refuge. Again, it's the same resource, Highly Sensitive Refuge, but a different article. 5 ways to protect your emotions as an HSP by Casey Hayes. And it talks about these ways, and one of them is get out in nature. Aside from calming your overstimulated HSP sensitive, it's good for you. And so, that could be going for a walk, sitting outside and listening to the birds, going to a park, going hiking, going kayaking, going to the beach or the mountains. It might be sitting outside for 5 minutes all the way to a week-long vacation. So there's just getting outside and immersing yourself in nature is calming and soothing and healing. Number 2, sage your space. It helps cleanse you of uncomfortable lingering emotions. Now, I know this one is controversial. Rooted in ancient indigenous and Native American traditions. If you don't feel comfortable with this, if you don't want to do this, then don't do it. But some people find sage burning, it just is sort of a practice that helps them to kind of clear everything out. Okay, so that one, if you don't want to do it, like I said, don't knock me. That's what the article's talking about. You don't have to do it, but some people do find it helpful. Number 3, visualize a protective force to help calm your overwhelmed emotions. So for us, that's the presence of God. Despite it says many of us staying home these days, the time will come again when we find ourselves less than optimal social situations. I guess this was written during COVID. Sensory overwhelm due to multiple energies battling for attention or feeling drained after an encounter with an energy vampire. I have one of those in my life. I know how that is, and I have to completely block them from my life. And it sucks, but I have to. And they do not stop trying to push those boundaries, and I have to keep strong with my boundaries. But anyway, visualization techniques are an effective tool for helping you to stay integrated, visualizing calm, listening to meditations, listening to stuff like that. So that's another one you can do, is visualize a protective force to calm you. Some people picture sort of this bubble around them. Some people, like I said, you can picture God's literal physical presence of protection around you, angels protecting you that God has sent. There's a lot of ways that you can do that, but meditation, visualization, sitting in silence, picturing a white glowing light surrounding your being, like rays from the sun. I've done meditations like that sort of create this sort of space around you that just keep you safe. And I give that credit to God. I see that as God's power. I see that as the power of the Holy Spirit. And then number 4, utilize grounding techniques like sitting still, taking a deep breath, measured breaths. One thing that I do is I do a lot of body scan meditations where I feel certain parts of my body, I breathe into them, I release the tension, and I go through every part of my body and I consciously feel myself breathing into that, and I actually feel that, like I'm real, I know I'm there. And grounding, that's kind of what it is. Getting grounded in your body and mind is a powerful step when it comes to guarding your feelings and well-being. Grounding techniques pull us back to solid earth. So a lot of times it's feeling the earth beneath your feet or beneath your body. When a stressful situation or emotional event sends us spiraling, such as receiving criticism at work or getting into an argument or partner. It sounds very strange, but it works. Taking a seat, planting both feet firmly on the floor to gain a sense of stability and support. Having some kind of anchor, like God. At night, I sleep with this small pillow and I'll wrap myself and hug it. If you have a, if you're in a relationship, if you're married, you might cuddle with your partner. That could be a grounding technique as well. You can do breathing techniques where you breathe, your heart rate is up, you breathe and you count, you hold it for a couple of seconds and you go back down and you do that for a few breaths, things like that. Those are good techniques. Engage in mindset work. Try to find the root of what is depleting your emotions is number 5. One big factor in protecting our emotions is realizing when our energy is being depleted in the first place. So being consciously aware of it and just kind of coming back to that, asking questions, journaling, or just reflecting, taking some time to check in with yourself. Why do I feel anxious? Because I have an important call on the calendar. Why would I make me anxious? Because I want the call to go well and I'm afraid it won't. That's an example of how you might check in with yourself. It may seem like it'll make you more aware of it, but being aware of it can actually help you to get a grip on it, right? So once you get a true root to your anxious energy, you can take steps to contribute to a positive outcome as best you can. For example, preparing well for the outcome of that meeting. I get nervous when I do these talks because I'm scared somebody's going to cut grass, or I'm scared that the equipment's going to fail. I'm scared I'm going to screw up. But I just have to go with it. Be aware of it and then go with it, right? So those are 5 ways to protect your emotions as an HSP. And so the last section that I wanted to cover was Christians are especially vulnerable as HSPs because they're in a double whammy, so to speak, of being sensitive to the needs of other people. You know that God commands us to love people and to help people. And then you also are attuned to that naturally. So that people can take advantage of that. Even when they don't mean to, they can take advantage of that. And so here are some things you can do to protect yourself. This is part of those 21 as a Christian HSP. Cultivate a strong relationship with God. Pray regularly, spend time in prayer, and seek guidance, strength, and comfort. Read scripture, especially verses that emphasize God's love, protection, wisdom, and healing. For example, Psalm 91, which is one of my favorites, and Matthew 11, 28 through 30. Another one, set boundaries. Learn to say no. Recognize your limits and do not overcommit. It's actually a good Christian practice to do that, because if you help everybody all the time, you're going to be drained and dead. And then you can help nobody any of the time. So you're actually being more efficient and helping more people to implement boundaries and self-care. Okay? And it talks about that in Luke 5:16. Luke 5:16. Prioritize self-care is another thing. Make time to rest and have renewal. Follow the principles of Sabbath rest. Exodus 28 through 11 talks about that. Number 3, support yourself with supportive community. Join a faith-based group like a church or a club or a group, in a Bible study or a support group. Engage in small group or Bible study that offers mutual support and encouragement. Seek mentorship. Find a trusted mentor or spiritual advisor who understands your sensitivity and can offer wise counsel. That might even be taking an online program if you don't have access to people in person. Surround yourself with supportive community is number 3. Number 4 is practice emotional awareness and regulation. As I was talking about a minute ago, check in with yourself. Acknowledge your emotions and your feelings. Be honest with yourself and God about how you're feeling about things. Use Psalms as a model for expressing a wide range of feelings to God. I've heard people say that certain emotions, just having them is a sin. They're not a sin unless you have malice and you want to kill somebody or something. But anger, shame, sadness, fear, those are all part of the natural range of human emotions that God gave us. Overwhelming yourself with them isn't going to help, but neither is denying them. That's why I have the acorn technique, so you can process that stuff, right? You can process it. Develop coping strategies, techniques like breathing, journaling, reflective prayer to manage overwhelming emotions. Number 5, engage in spiritual disciplines. I talk about doing the somatic and healing work. There's a lot of overlap here, even as a Christian, to protect yourself as an HSP. Meditation and contemplation, spend time in quiet reflection, focusing on God's promises and presence. Philippians 4:8 is what that's based on. Worship and praise is part of engaging in your spiritual practice. Participate in worship to shift your focus from stressors to God's greatness and goodness. And that might be listening to praise and worship music. It might be doing some kind of singing or some kind of meditation that is more of a praise-oriented type. There's a lot of ways you can do praise and worship at church or at home or any other places. Embrace your identity. Sorry, I went ahead. Engage in spiritual disciplines was number 5. Number 6, guard your heart and mind. Filter input. Limit exposure to negative or stressful media. Focus on what is true, noble, right, pure, lovely, and admirable. Sound familiar? Because it's Philippians 4:8. Be mindful of relationships is another part of in guarding your heart and mind. Choose friends and associates who are uplifting and avoid those who drain and exploit your sensitivity. Even the Bible talks about not keeping company with people that are rebel rousers, people that stir up trouble in a bad way, people that are always causing conflict, people that drag you down. Even the Bible talks about not keeping company with, quote, fools. And so that's biblical as well. Guard your heart and mind is number 6. Number 7, embrace your identity in Christ. Affirm your worth. Remind yourself that you are fearfully and wonderfully made. I say that all the time on this channel, and that's based on Psalms 139:14, that you are fearfully and wonderfully made and deeply loved by God. Focus on your purpose is another part of embracing your identity in Christ. Understand that your sensitivity is a gift for compassion and empathy, which can be used to serve others in Christ-like love, but it has to be protected. It's precious. You're precious. You're not better than anybody else, but you are precious and you deserve to be protected and loved. That is the opposite of probably what you got growing up and in a lot of relationships, but you are precious. You are a treasure and you deserve to be loved and protected. The end. Okay? So that was some of the ways you can protect yourself as a Christian HSP. Why are we more vulnerable? Well, because we have heightened empathy. Christian HSPs often feel a strong calling to help others because we're called to do that, which can lead to overextending ourselves and neglecting our own needs. Moral and ethical sensitivity, a strong sense of right and wrong, can cause HSPs to feel deeply affected by injustice and sin in the world. And that's why there's a strong social justice movement right now. Whatever you feel about that, a lot of those people are HSPs. And I am an INFJ, which is an introvert, intuitive, feeling, judger, and those people are very justice-oriented as well. Moral and ethical sensitivity is one of them. Right and wrong, a strong sense of right and wrong. We're very attuned to that, deeply affected by injustice and sin in the world, and we don't want to see that. It breaks our heart. Desire for peace, the pursuit of peace and harmony, can make HSPs more susceptible to being taken advantage of by others who do not share their values. So I like peace. I can't stand conflict. I hate it. And so if somebody's doing or saying something that might be something I need to say something about, I don't want to, because I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to stir up trouble. But there are times where you do need to speak up, and that is the right thing to do, and that is okay. So that is another thing that Christian HSPs can be more vulnerable towards. So additional protection strategies of Christian HSPs: discernment in service. Discernment in service. Seek God's guidance. Pray for wisdom to know when and how to serve others without compromising your well-being. Pray for wisdom to know when and how to serve others without compromising your well-being. So seek God's guidance. Serve within limits. Recognize it's okay to step back and let others lead or do the work sometimes. Serve with limits. Number 2, healthy communication. Healthy communication: express needs clearly, communicate your needs and boundaries to others with kindness and firmness. So you express your needs clearly by communicating your needs and boundaries to others with kindness and firmness. Listen to God's voice. Tune into the Holy Spirit's promptings and be obedient to God's leading in every situation. Number 3, find refuge in God's promises. Find refuge in God's promises. Trust in God's protection. Believe in God's promise to be your refuge and strength. Psalms 46:1. Lean on God's grace as part of refuge and protection. Lean on God's grace. Remember that God's grace is sufficient and His power is made perfect in weakness. 2 Corinthians 12:9. I constantly talk about God's grace, about studying scriptures on grace, about meditating on grace, about soaking in grace. That will help heal you and protect you as an HSP. So by integrating these practices in our daily lives, Christian HSPs can protect themselves from emotional overwhelm and remain effective in their faith journey and service to others. So that's how you protect yourself as an HSP and as a Christian HSP in particular. This has been a very long talk. Thank you for going on this journey with me. We've talked about what an HSP is, the science behind it, and the strengths and challenges that HSPs can deal with. We've talked about how to protect yourself emotionally and ways to set boundaries. And we've talked about how to protect yourself in using specific practices and how to protect yourself specifically as a Christian HSP. So I hope this talk has been helpful. I hope it's giving you some ideas. I'll put all those resources in the show notes. If you haven't clicked the subscribe bell, you will get notifications every time a new YouTube drops and also every time a new podcast drops, because the podcast is also in the YouTube channel. Also, check out my other resources if you'd like to contribute and help me to be able to help more people. You can contribute through Patreon. That's linked in the show notes. Monthly, you can subscribe and you can cancel at any time on that. And then Ko-Fi, you can make a one-time donation. Check out the Facebook group, Christian Emotional Recovery, linked in the show notes, the other resources on the talk, and so forth and so on. And if you want to join the mailing list, which will update you when new courses and new resources and sometimes when new podcasts come out, check that out also at rachelleroy.com and christianemotionalrecovery.com for the podcast and for more free resources. Thank you so much. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for following me. Remember that you are fearfully and wonderfully made. This has been 21 ways to protect yourself as an HSP. Thank you so much for listening. God bless you. And remember, beloved, you are fearfully and wonderfully made, and God loves you.